All right. Should be working. There we go. Making sure that I have my audio working right. All right. Um, hello. Episode 8. I can't believe I say this every time. I can't believe that I've made it to 8 episodes already of Gear Talk. It is a really fun thing that I like to do every couple of weeks. Just take time out middle of the week and get a little geeky with Blade Nerd Talk. Um, I get a lot of questions throughout the week from the YouTube channel, from the podcast, from the website, from the Instagram with just random people who want to know, what I would recommend from skates, wheels, frames, bearings, how to do tricks, and what liners they need, stuff like that. Just sky's the limit. So every couple of weeks, I like to take a little time out, compile all of the best of the questions and some of the things that I actually didn't know, and did a little research to learn a little bit more about and share them with you. So thank you very much for watching. Let's get into it. So the first question, this one was actually a really great question, and one that I never really considered until I started getting more heavily involved in frame development. So I had a skater send me a message, and they were just getting back into skating, and they were skating K2 front streets, and I think stock. So with 58 millimeter wheels, or maybe they were a natural, so maybe they were 60 millimeter wheels. And they were having a really difficult time getting boot down on Royales. And, I was in that same situation. I had a really difficult time getting boot down on Royales for a long time. If, you're familiar with my YouTube channel, I started it about 2 years ago in 2016, just kind of chronicling my journey through skating. And, I used to skate back in the 90s, and, I left in about 2005 and got back into it 2016, so 11 years later or so. And remembered how to do the tricks, but my body didn't remember how to do the tricks. And that is kind of difficult to adjust to. You think that you can do a topside, but your body doesn't bend the way that it used to. So this guy was asking, I feel confident on Royales again, but I'm having a really hard time getting boot down. What can I do to help? And I started asking a few questions. Obviously, starting with you're old. You're much older than you used to be. So trying to get boot down on a Royale is going to take a lot more knee bending than you remember. It's going to take a lot of quad strength. It's going to take a lot of ankle strength. And that's something that for me personally took months of just going to the skate park and doing a Royale and just doing squats and just trying to get my legs to a point where when I get boot down, I don't slip out. And that takes some time. But it brought up a really interesting topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit, is how the equipment has changed over the years and what equipment matters for performing grinds. Specifically grinds. I don't want to get into airs and shock absorption and stuff like that. I feel like we've covered that pretty well. But specifically, what skates and frames, and I mean wheels even, have contributed to the evolution of grinds, and which ones I recommend for people depending on when they started. So back when we started skating, we had the standard rollerblade TRS, and this was probably 1994, maybe 93. And these are the skates that I'm talking about. So these have fallen apart. The North Carolina weather is horrible for old plastic, and this buckle has gotten destroyed in my garage, just like my t-shirt's going to be in about 30 minutes. But the Lightning TRS is the first real skate that I skated. This is the skate that we all started skating with. Um, this is the skate that most people invented grinds on. So they invented the front side, they invented the back side, they invented the soul grind, the Mizu, the Makio, all that stuff. It was a more difficult time to do grinds. You can see by the height of the frame, these are 72 millimeter wheels, and the frame mount is, probably where a soul would be nowadays. It's tall enough that it's really difficult to do. If you were trying to do a boot down Royale on this skate, you would probably struggle. And that sole, you can look at the size of the sole. It's like 2 fingers. I mean, the negative on most modern skates is bigger than 2 fingers. So we had to do tricks differently. And I actually have an aid with me. So I got this piece of PVC as a illustrator. So imagine this is, the rail, right? So when you do a soul grind with this skate, you can see this is a small PVC pipe too. But you've got to really roll your foot over, otherwise you're just going to slip off. So having to roll your foot over taught us how to do soul grinds differently. You bow your leg over like this, bone your leg over like this, and that's how you balance. Additionally, front sides didn't really matter, but when you were learning Royales, if you're trying to do a Royale with this skate, this groove, the Royale groove, you would have to grind it down pretty deep so that you could actually do a Royale rather than, sticking on the wheels and, just sliding all over the place. But you can see the angle. When you did a Royale, you would get a groove right here. And that's a different angle. So if I've got the rail, that's a different angle, like that. So if the rail's like this, it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can, there you go, that's a better angle. So you see that it's not parallel. And because the boot, where the angle of the groove is to the angle of the frame groove, you can see it's at an angle when you're doing Royale tricks. This is how we all learned Royales. And if you remember, what's probably the best example of the Royale is VG3 and Randy Spizer's section. I don't think anybody knew how to do Royales as well as Randy did. And if I remember correctly, in that video, he was on Majestic 12s. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think he was on Majestic 12s, which was the Rossi's version of the TRS. It had a shorter frame, so it didn't fit 72s. I think it fit 62s. Somebody's going to correct me. Smaller wheels. And it had a groove, and it had an H block. But it didn't have a sole plate. Maybe this fin was a little thicker. I think it was a little thicker. But it didn't have a sole plate. So you were still doing that groove, that Royale groove, using this again because it's white, like this. So it was at an angle. And boy, Randy, he could kill the Royale. The guy was incredible. He would jump on anything, do Royale, all over UC Irvine, all over all of Southern California. If there was a ledge, if there was a rail, I mean, he could jump on a Royale. And it was a really groundbreaking trick. I think that skating at that time, around VG2 or so, we were doing alley-oop tricks, we were doing topside tricks, but definitely, not on ledges. And alley-oop tricks, we were kind of sticking and such. There weren't really good skates. We would get stuck on the, this is metal on the bottom. So we would get stuck on the metal if we were doing soul tricks or alley-oop tricks. But then the Royale came, and I mean, it was, ridiculous. It was a revolution. And everybody was doing Royales. So around that time, which must have been 96, maybe. My years are probably a little off, so somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say it was around 96 or so. We started learning that the skates that we had needed to be improved in order to accommodate the way that skating was going. And probably the best example of this skate The most advanced skate for its time, and probably even today, was the K2 Fatty and the Fatty Pro. So I have a Fatty Pro here. So this is the K2 Fatty Pro. This was actually Andy Cruz's original prototype. I got this from when Eisenberg Skate Park went out of business. A good friend went to an estate sale where they were getting rid of all of the old stuff from the skate park, and he got these for me. So incredible find. It comes with original 50/50 grind plate. The one, before we even stamped the logo in them. It's incredible. And it comes with Cosmo mini flies. The bearings still roll. What a great find. These mini flies are actually in pretty good condition. I could probably skate these. I only have 4 of them, but 54 anti-rocker, that's a little low. Anyway, so this is the K2 Fatty. The K2 Fatty was way ahead of its time. There were a few things that I addressed that we were running into problems with. The first with sole grinds, we were rubbing on the rivets. The rivets that held the sole and the frame to the boot were metal. And with it being metal, they weren't protected, which was great when we were doing coping or when we were jumping on handrails. But if you were doing ledges, that metal on cement just sticks, especially on alley-oop tricks. Personally, I have a really hard time doing alley-oop tricks on stickier ledges, and metal made it even stickier. So these introduced a protected sole. So the sole is actually pretty worn down, but you can see on the negative side, the rivets are actually protected. So you can see that they're sunken underneath where the sole mounts. And that meant that when you were skating, your sole tricks weren't touching any rivets. You can see actually on the sole side, even though this skate is worn down pretty low, this is how high it should be, and then over here it's really worn down. The rivets still haven't been touched. So that was a huge breakthrough. And that allowed K2 skaters to do sole grinds, and especially topside tricks, real effortlessly. I mean, they were so good at them. But the real groundbreaking innovation of the K2 Fatty, in my opinion, was the Royale groove. So you remember with the TRS and then the Majestic 12, it was at an angle. This one was almost flat. Little bit angled, but almost flat. So when you would jump on, you jump on your rail, right? You just lock on at a perfect angle. So it's not the crazy angle that it used to be. Slight angle, but not this. It's this. And what that meant is that people could do Royales differently. When they were jumping on Royales, they were sliding on the plastic. They were locking on better in a Royale groove. They didn't have to push their toes together and toes up and such like we had to learn how to do Royales. It was a very different feeling. I don't know what they call this now. I would call it just a straight groove versus an angled groove. I'm sure there's a name for it, but that was something that I'm sure that there were other skates that did it first. But K2 was the one that I know, and I would give K2 credit for the innovation. They really made Royale and groove tricks an incredible progression in our sport. You would see, the famous Jason Marshall backslide on that rail where he's got his shirt off and he's got his arm like this perfect backslide pose. That was in a K2 skate. And the reason for that is this material up here. So all the way at the top, this material was like I don't know if it was a plastic or a leather or what, but it was a little slower. So you could kind of balance on that material, and it would slow you down a little bit. It wasn't just all plastic, which meant that you could balance these long Royales on ledges or on specifically rails, backslides on rails. And, you know, you could balance for days because you were wearing on the material. You weren't wearing on this crazy plastic. As a result, skaters who grew up skating these K2 fatties have different, I guess the way that they do their Royales, their angle, their style is different. I grew up on the TRS. So for me, my favorite style of skate, instead of this straight angle, I actually prefer the side angle, which is kind of like the Valo or the them skate. So these are my them skates. So the Royale angle on these is that angle. It's very subtle. It's just a little bit, but it's a little bit more than you know, if you were trying to get an Aeon or a shift. So that and the Valo. The Valo actually has a more pronounced angle. So this is that Valo angle. And you can see that the angle, you know, goes, I don't know if it's like 20 degrees or something like that, an angle. But if you looked at a Razor Shift, so this Razor Shift, this angle lines up perfectly. And that's great for people who learned in the K2 Fatty world, who learned on, oh, what else? Probably the Deshi were like that. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine the Deshi were like that. The Aeons, any of those skates that lined up perfectly, that is a really nice way for them to ease back in. If they used to skate those skates, if you were skating fatties, you probably want a skate that has a lined up angle like this. If you were skating TRS and the other skates, maybe Oxygens back in the days, you probably want the Valos or the them skates. Now, which one's better? It's really hard to say. I bet there are people out there who have opinions on which one's better and which one's not. I think you could definitely argue that the straight angle is probably easier for doing unities and backside royales. If you were doing a backside royale on an angled groove, you do have the tendency of slipping off a little bit, but you can put more weight on your heel of your sole plate, and that helps you balance it out. I think it all just comes down to personal preference. For me, you know, it was what I learned on. My Royales are very V13 heavy, you know, where I have that angle. I know a lot of people who just do it straight, and you know, it really doesn't matter. You're still doing the trick. You just got to find the skates that are best for you. So that's the groove. Frames make a big difference as well. And so to talk a little bit about the frames, I'm going to use my stick again. But I'll start with this. So this is a Razor Shift with a rollerblade blank frame. And the rollerblade blank frame is designed for anti-rocker. So you can see the groove is like a 4-finger groove on the inside. And the height of this frame where you get the groove is, what's that, 1 knuckle, I guess? Because this Razor Shift has a massive sole and the groove is nice and lined up, when you need to get boot down on a Royale, you don't have to get that far down. So right now I'm boot down. And that's crazy. That's not low at all. I mean, I don't know my angles, but that's not low at all. Take that and compare it to a Valo. So this is a V13. This is a V13 with the Valo frame. You can see the height of the Valo frame. You can see the deepness of the groove and the fact that the sole isn't very big. That means that this angle is going to be tighter. So when you're doing a Royale, you got to get a lot lower. And it might not look like a lot on the video, but it is a big difference in person. I don't know that I could put both of them on. I'll probably drop them all on my head. But That makes a huge difference. So if you're trying to get boot down on a Royale, two things that you should look at. Obviously, if you're a really great skater, you can do it with big frames. I've seen, so take a look at these. So these are the Kaiser level 3 frames, 3.1 frames. These things fit 72 mil wheels, maybe 80. What is it? 72? I think they're 72s. So a 72 mil wheel, and it still has a groove for grinds. So if you put this on, like for example, if you put this on that Valo, which already has a small sole, this angle is super tight. So you're gonna have to get really low in order to do a Royale on this. And that's not to say you can't do it. People are really strong with their quads. If you're doing squats a lot, all that it is getting that balance right and then doing a really good squat and keeping your legs strong. But if you're getting back into it, my opinion and recommendation for easing yourself into boot down Royales, get the lowest profile frame that you can get. Now that's not to say the lowest wheel, but you need to get that groove as low as you can. Something like a rollerblade blank frame would be fine. The ground control featherlight frame would be fine. Anything with a really low deep groove that's designed for anti-rocker. And then you want to pair it with something that has a big sole. So something like the Razor's Shift, or even the USD Aeon out of the box. Let me compare that one. So the USD Aeon, just out of the box, this groove, the sole isn't huge, and this groove isn't super low, but because it angles pretty well, you don't have to get super low to get on the USD Aeon. The 60 millimeter USD Aeon. If you're on the 72, you're gonna have to get, like that more. But if you're on the 60 millimeter Aeon, this is a pretty good setup out of the box. I would probably say the easiest skates to start learning Royales, and the skates that I switched to, and really the first skates that I felt comfortable doing Royales, were the Razor's Shift. And I think I was on Wish frames at the time, which is another great groove for a frame. It's a little taller than the blank frame, but the groove I feel is more forgiving, and you can balance a lot better. So I was on a Razor Shift with a Wish frame, or a Razor Shift with a Featherlight frame. That's probably a really great combination. If you're just getting back into it, if you want to start doing Royales and you don't have the leg strength yet to really balance yourself out, you can balance pretty well with that combination. The final thing I think to talk about is maybe topside tricks and sole tricks. So sole tricks, people are going to say the bigger the sole, the easier it is, and that's absolutely true. This is, the USD Aeon. This is the 60 mil Aeon. It's a pretty big sole. What I say that TRS was 2 fingers. I mean, this is almost 3 fingers. It's a huge sole. What I like also about the Aeon is you can see the light's kind of, there we go. You can see where I'm grinding it, and you can see a lot of wear on the outside, and then on the inside, that's like the rail groove, right? This is the ledge groove, the rail groove, or coping groove or whatever. I don't really skate rails that much, but it's the coping groove. So the groove, the way that the sole is angled, the less plastic that you have on the ledge, the faster you're going to go and the better you're going to lock. And this really matters when you're doing topside tricks for me. So when you've got a rail and you lock on topside, a lot of times for me when I land topside, I'm actually rolling a little bit and I push my foot down. So it's like a 2-step process. So I kind of land topside and then I push my foot down and lock myself on. You can see already, if I'm rolling like this, I'm gonna slip off because my boot the sole isn't there enough. You really gotta roll yourself over a little bit so that boot, the sole of the boot locks onto the corner of the ledge or the coping. The lower the frame, the easier it is for rolling over onto topside tricks. And the bigger the sole, the easier it is to keep from slipping out on topside tricks. So I really like the USD Aeon for topside tricks. It is a fabulous skate. It is a low profile frame. It is one of the lowest profile frames. It is a nice big fat sole. Some people say that it's a little stiff. You're going to want a fairly squishy boot for topside tricks. The more loose, the easier it is. When you jump on topside, you could push down on that boot so that you don't actually have to have your leg like this, because that's really difficult, especially with new muscles who aren't used to doing topsides. But you could push down, and once you lock on, you just push and you can lock yourself in. It's harder on the Aeon than it is on like a Shift. The Razor Shift is a very squishy skate for me. And it's also another great example if you wanted to do topside tricks. I like the Razor Shift. I like doing the Razor Shift, doing the topside tricks with the Razor Shift and the Featherlights. I like them with the 50-50 frames. Any sort of low profile, maybe 60 millimeter max wheel is a really great combination for topside tricks with a big sole skate like a Razor Shift. I really like the them skates, the 908s. And I showed you before, but this is my setup. The sole isn't as big as the Aeon is, and it also doesn't have the. You can see the wear. How can I do this? So you can see the wear. It's fairly even compared to the Aeon, where I had most of the wear on the edge, and then I had the coping wear on the inside. These are fairly even, and that leads me to believe that the sole is fairly flat. Again, it's not a huge deal. If you roll over, you're still going to get that angle and that good lock. But if you don't roll over and if you're kind of upright, the Aeon, because of the angle of the sole plate, will help you stay on the ledge and obstacle a little bit better. But something about this skate, I don't know if it's the squishiness of the boot or if it's just the way that it locks. I feel really confident doing topside tricks with it. I am riding 50-50 frames, which are a low profile frame, maximum 58 millimeter wheel. These are actually 60s that you can ride with the them skates because they have the front wheel well. What would you say? So the sole plate has a little groove cut out of it so that the wheels can extend past the frame, which is nice. So yeah, 60s, great. Really, again, it comes back to what feels natural to you. Basic rule of thumb, though, for me, and to summarize all of the things for boot down royales. Best recommendation is if you used to do boot down royales, remember what sort of skate that you were doing them in. If it was a straight skate like a K2 Fatty, then you should probably stick with a straight angle like a Razor Shift or a USD Aeon, or even the K2 New Jacks, K2 Front Streets, or a Naturals, sorry, the Rollerblade New Jack. Rollerblade New Jack is also what's the angle on this? It's complicated. So the Rollerblade New Jack is actually, it's a really difficult skate to do royales. This groove is really big, so there's a lot of room for slipping around, and it's really deep, which means that you have to get even lower. I don't recommend these for boot down royales, at least for learning them. I had a really difficult time doing boot down royales in these skates, and I slipped out a lot. Check out my Instagram if you want to see the struggle for doing boot down royales on a down ledge. It was not pretty. 20 seconds of just slipping out every second. Anyway, getting off topic. So aligning. So if you started with K2 Fatties back in the days, you probably want to stick with something that has a straight angle, like a Razor Shift, like a USD Aeon, something like that. If you grew up skating the Majestic 12s or the Rollerblade Dirks, you probably want to stick with something with an angle, like the Them 908 or the Valo V13s, or any of the Razor's The Colts are like that. I think were the SLs like that? I think the Colts are like that. I think the SLs are a straight and the Colts were an angle. So that's Royales. You want to get a deep groove. So not necessarily a low profile frame, but a deeper groove means that you don't have to bend down as low and you can get that angle pretty easily. For sole tricks, I like to always get the biggest sole that you can get without scraping. Realize that the bigger the sole and the lower frame, the harder it is for you to do turns without scraping and doing set slides out, which can be fun, but it's not so much fun when it catches up to you and you don't ready for it, you're not prepared for it. I like to get a big sole. I like to make sure that the sole is angled so that I lock on a little bit better. For topside tricks, I like to have a low profile frame. Something like a 50-50 frame, something like a Featherlight 3. I'm sure there's a bunch of good Kaiser frames as well. I'm not super familiar with the Kaiser aggressive line, but the lower the frame, the easier it will be to do topsides because you don't have to get down as low and you can still get that angle and lock on. And I think that's it. Thanks for watching. All right, I'm starting to sweat. Oh, already. North Carolina in the summer, guys. I tell you what, it is the worst thing. I had the fan going for a while and it was great, but then it just started getting so noisy in here that I had to turn it off. I'm just dripping already. You can probably watch from the beginning to the end and just see the sweat accumulating. I could do a speed up, what's it called, a time lapse to show the sweat just starting to take over me. Let me put these skates back and have a little water. Ugh. So many skates all over the place. This is also the time if you have questions. I've got a couple other topics that I wanted to handle tonight, but I would love to answer questions, and I'm checking out the chat, so please feel free to leave any questions in the chat. If you left them earlier, I have a hard time scrolling up and seeing them, so feel free to leave them now, and I'd be more than happy to address them if I can. If I can't, at least I'll talk about them and say that I can. All these skates. All right. Brought my water this time. Okay. Oh, Scott. So the Rosie's Fifth Element. You know, I always forget about the Fifth Elements. I don't know why. I never owned a pair of Fifth Elements. You know, I remember when they came out, and unfortunately, so when skate companies make skates, here's a little bit of inside baseball. So when skate companies make skates, they, you know, a brand new shell, a brand new mold, they make one size. And that one size is what they base the other sizes off of. You know, it's really expensive to make a mold. You're talking $20,000 for a single size. So, you know, now you know why it was really difficult for John to start a skate company. Guaranteed that he wants to make his own mold, but he's going to have to come up with a lot of money. He has 3 shells now. That's 60 grand out of pocket. So that's a lot of money. And I'm sure that number went up since I last quoted it. It was a long time ago. But when you're making your own skate, there are sample sizes. So they start with the single size, and they make sure that they get the skate right. And typically that sample size is what they would measure as a 42. And that's typically like a size 9, 8.5, 9 or so. That's kind of the sample size. So if you were a skater and you wore a size 9 skate, you were a sample size, and you were able to test the fresh new skates. I was never, I always had an opportunity because with my involvement with 50/50 and with the industry, um, I was around when new skates were coming out, and I was able to see them when they were being developed. I was never able to skate new skates. The only exception was the Cyrus. So the USD Cyrus actually came in a size 910. That was their sample size. So I was able to skate them. And I loved those skates. They were so great. Another parallel straight groove, by the way, USD Cyrus. But so when the Fifth Elements came out, I was able to see them. My business partner Jess had a pair, and John Julio had a pair. John was skating a pair of size 8s, I believe, at the time, and I think Jess was a pair of size 9s. And the shell, I think, was the same. It might have been two different shells, but you could probably fit a liner into a size 42 shell and still make it work. I tried so much to put my foot in there because I saw, the Fifth Element. That was when the backside Farfanugan came out, and they were doing them before, but nobody did them as good as John. And he would just get boot down on these backside Farfs and just. It's incredible. That famous England ad in Laguna Beach where he's all fitted and he's doing it on the rail, the ramp to the. It's so good. So yeah, John makes every trick look good, but he definitely made the backside Farf look amazing. And I wanted to do those tricks so bad. I remember the one time that I got the skates and I shoved my foot in there and I was like, oh, this hurts, but I'm going to make it work. The only trick that I did was a backside Farf, and I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it. I just kind of threw my foot up there and assumed that, it was the skates that, John's not that good. He's just got good skates. But no, John's actually pretty good. And they were good skates. So I never had Fifth Elements. That's something that I really need to find. So I'm going to keep my eyes out. As soon as I get some money, I'm going to keep my eyes out and see if I can find a pair of old Fifth Elements in fairly good condition. I like to keep my collection fairly crisp. Fairly good condition, old Fifth Elements, probably the black and red ones. If anybody sees them, just keep an eye out for me. I'd love to pick them up just because I remember them so fondly. They were such a stylish skate. And, the tricks at that time were amazing. I saw Joey at Mushroom Blading posted a picture of the Champion Bomb Stimmler 50/50 ad today on Instagram. And, Champion was wearing those crazy roasties. This was probably right after Oxygen and right before USD. And he was in those red and black roasties. He looked so good. Oh, he made those skates look so good. I would love a pair. I don't know what your question was. I just got a little crazy with the Fifth Element. But I loved the Fifth Element. I do believe that it was a response to the K2 Fatty. And Rossi's at the time had such a success with the Majestic 12, they wanted to do something fun. And the Fifth Element was their answer. And it was a great skate. It was really well received. It had some great technology in it. The Royale angle was great. People did some pretty great rails and grinds in those skates, especially the backside Farf. Going all the way back, Eric asks the opinion on the Cultic Big Yokes freestyle frame. I'm not super familiar with the Cultic line, I have to be honest. I know frames pretty well, but I don't know aggressive frames all that well. I don't know if it's a market research sort of thing, but being a frame company, I don't review aggressive frames anymore. I feel like that would be a very difficult thing for an owner of a frame company to be unbiased in. And I try to avoid rumors and looking at products. I'm sure I'm familiar with them, but I'm not super familiar with them. I can tell you though, on freestyle frames, I think that freestyle is fine. If you saw the talk a little bit earlier about boot down royales, a freestyle frame allows you to have a really deep groove. And with a really deep groove, you're able to get boot down without having to get super low and angled. You could still kind of stay straight because that groove in the freestyle frame is so much higher because it doesn't have to worry about wheels. that when you're on your boot, you could just kind of crank it over and your boot down. Um, I wouldn't call it cheating. I don't think that we're in our 30s and we're on rollerblades. I don't think anybody can call anything cheating anymore. Um, you just skate how you skate. I think freestyle is fine. I have never seen a pair of freestyle frames in the wild, and I don't skate that often with people. But I don't know anybody in my little crew in Raleigh who skates freestyle. There's a lot of anti-rocker and there's a lot of flat, a lot of wish frames, and a lot of featherlights. And, thankfully now a lot of 50-50. But I don't see anybody skating freestyle. I don't know if that's because there aren't a lot of freestyle frames out there, or if that's because freestyle isn't cool anymore and none of the pros skate it, so none of the fans skate it. I don't really know. I'm really interested though. I think that freestyle has its merits. I don't know. I never skated freestyle. I designed the 50-50 freestyle frame and then I left the sport. So I held a pair of 50-50 freestyle frames in my hands last week when I sent them out as a Rob G. So we had a lot of the old vintage frames in a warehouse in California. No, this was a warehouse in Michigan. Thank you, Mark Vanderbo, for holding it down all those years. And we had a bunch of frames out there, and we had some freestyle frames. And Mark actually had the idea of donating those frames to the Rob G Fund, and we were able to raise, a few $100. And we donated those frames. That was the first time that I held a pair of freestyle frames in my hand. I don't know. I wasn't really into skating when freestyle was a thing. I skated juice blocks for a little bit, and then I left. And then I got back into it, and I've never seen a freestyle frame being skated. So I think that there is potential there. I don't know. I have to get back to you. I know that's a lot of talking for me to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you. But it's this honesty. Josh, 50-50 wheels. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about 50-50 wheels. So I have never made wheels before. I've made grind plates. That was like my first thing where I was designing grind plates and coming up with different ideas and different materials. And, we had the aluminum grind plate. We had the thin backslide plates. I designed the juice blocks. I helped design the frames and the UFS frames and the balance frames and the core system frames. All throughout those years, 50-50 never sold wheels. And there were two reasons. The first was that when 50-50 got started, we were really good friends and distributors of Cosmo wheels in the United States. There was a distribution company called Toilet Distribution, which I know it's pretty bad. But when we were in Northern California, we were Toilet Distribution. And we distributed 50-50 and we distributed Cosmo. And, I always skated Cosmo wheels. And because I always had wheels, I never had a reason to look into making wheels. Why would I? When we moved down to Southern California, 50-50 joined in the warehouse with England. So this was right when England Clothing was getting started, 96 maybe. 96 is when they started, 97 is when I moved down. So we started working together. We were making frames. This was right when, we were making adapter plates for all the different skates, and Solomon started getting on the market, and we were like, ooh, that looks cool. That's a fun looking skate. Let's make adapter plates for it. And they were like, well, slow your roll. What if instead of making adapter plates, what if we created a brand new frame system? Eventually that was UFS. This was around 99, 2000 when we started talking about it. The first Aaron Feinberg Solomon ST8 came out in 2001. And a few months later is when the first 50-50 UFS frame came out. So we were always a frame company. And, there was a time when we were in the same warehouse with USD as well as England. But we never had wheels. And I don't know why we never had wheels. It's an excellent question. we had the contacts, you know. It's like we knew people at Bravo. We could have easily had, you know, the wheels ported hyper with Senate or Mind Game, or Medium. And then, you know, as things progress with Supercomputer Robot and all that, I'm sure that if we had the ambition to make wheels, we would have. But for some reason, we never thought about it. So when I got back into it, you know, I first of all wanted to get skating again. And I had, you know, a pair of old 50/50 frames. Obviously loved the 50/50 frames. I designed the things, you know, and we went through revisions to make them the way that I liked them. So obviously that's the frame that I wanted to stick with. And, you know, I went to Oak City Skate Shop, and Long hooked me up with a set of, I was skating flat 58s. So I had 58 millimeter Valo wheels. And they were fine. Absolutely fine. I still have them on my my Aeons. So these are the wheels that I started out with. Look at that. I mean, they're still in amazing condition. These are great wheels. I know that some people might not like them. I don't know why. They're great wheels. Super long lasting, good rebound. What's not to like? So I was skating those for a long time, and they were great. I think when I left, let's see, I got the Wish frame. That's what changed everything. So I got the Wish frame, and I got some 7260s. I think I started with Undercover on the inside and Go Project on the outside, and then I eventually went to Go Project and Go Project. Really liked them. You know, no complaints at all with the wheels. Then I switched around. I got 50/50 frames, and I got some dead wheels, and I've been just kind of jumping around skating different wheels. And I came to the realization that I know a lot about wheels. You know, I've skated them a lot. I've skated frames, and I know frames really well, and I review them. And I know what I like in a frame, and I know what works in a wheel. And I wanted to come out with a wheel that was perfect for the 50/50 balance frame. And that's an interesting problem. So first of all, the industry has changed a lot since the balance frame came out in 2003. So the UFS frame was 2001, balance frame was 2003, core system was 2005, and that's when I left. Balance frame is just I don't have an original UFS frame here. So a balance frame, so this is a balance frame, too bright. White is bad. White is coming soon, but white is bad for the video. Here's a balance frame. Here, black, better. So this is a balance frame. You know, it's just a UFS frame. The original 50/50 UFS frame was this design, but it wasn't symmetrical. So it actually had it was like the original frame. This is gonna get even deeper, so check this out. I found this on Facebook about 3 weeks ago. What is this? So this is the original 50/50 medium frame. These are what started it all. So these are the old frames that came on the USD Thrones. These ones probably came on the Josh Petty, maybe. We also sold them in aftermarket. They needed adapter plates to mount on the skates because skates weren't flat at the time. When they were flat, you could do UFS, but because they were raised, like the TRS, we had them with adapter plates here that would mount onto the boot, pop on, 2 frame bolts in the middle. Kind of looks like UFS, right? So this was the original. I love these frames. These frames are classic. So when we designed the UFS frame, we used this as the model for the UFS. But you can see this back. So this back angled like this. The problem with that on a UFS frame is because they're symmetrical. If you have one side that goes like this, then you can't run them symmetrical, right? You can't flip it around because then it would be all like sticking out in the middle and look all weird. The balance frames balanced, so symmetrical. It also had 8mm axles. These came with 6mm axles. So a few upgrades. We also made the groove a little deeper, a little better pre-groove so it was easier. And we added the juice bumps. These are the little humps on the side. Help you with topside tricks. They lock on really good. Help you with cess slides, prevent the wheels from rubbing. They protect your axles. I mean, obviously, I designed it. I love this frame. But skating it flat with 58 millimeter wheels was less than ideal. So it was designed for 58 millimeter max wheels. When you're skating anti-rocker, that's great. When you're skating with juice blocks, that's great, which is how I have them here. So these are the juice blocks. It's kind of like a freestyle setup. When you're skating with juice blocks, it's great because you've got bigger wheels on the outside, you've got juice blocks on the inside. You're not going to rub on the inside. Even if you had anti-rocker wheels, you're not going to rub on the inside. But if you wanted to skate flat, 58 millimeter is a little big. So I started looking around and I couldn't find anybody that was making a 56 millimeter anymore. When these frames were designed, and all of the skates that came with our frames back in the days, they all came with 56 millimeter wheels. Here is an example. So these are the Solomon, what are these? The STI Pros, I think. They come with these Billy Prislin wheels, and they're 56. The Cosmo John Julio wheels that came on the original John Julio USD Throne, 56 millimeter. It's really hard to find a 56 millimeter wheel. Now I have found a 56 millimeter wheel that I like. I'll give a little plug. These are, actually I have another set. These are the Apex, opening them up, so I haven't skated them yet. All right, these are the Apex wheels. So this is Long's company, Apex. These are 90A and 94A. They are good wheels. I have not skated them yet. I have seen Mikey Lynch, Mikey Holmes. Mikey Lynch is a podcaster. Mikey Holmes is a rollerblade on the triangle. I've seen Mikey skate them. He loves them. He skates them on balance frames. Absolutely no problems with sticking. So I said to myself, I want to learn how to make wheels because obviously there's a hole in the market. I want wheels for myself. There's a market for wheels for 56 millimeter, and I want to be able to provide a wheel that I feel is the best experience for my frames. And right now I don't have a recommendation. I have these Apex wheels, but I want to sell my own. So I think the Apex wheels are a great deal. I don't see why you wouldn't want Apex wheels. I will put a link in the description to where you can get a set of Apex wheels. If you have a pair of balance frames, they are great. I've actually talked to Long about putting some of these on the 50/50 website and selling them for the same price. He'll make the money. But if you've already ordered 50/50 frames, you want some of these in the box, we'll put them on the website so that when the white frames come in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to get a box with frames as well, with bearings, frames, and 56 millimeter wheels, Apex wheels. But I want to own it, I don't want to run out. I don't want to rely on Long for having them in stock. And honestly, I want to skate these and see what the profile, this profile is a flat profile. I don't know that that's the best profile. So I want to try different things and I want to see what I prefer as a skater, doing grinder blading, but riding a flat setup. So I started looking into it. I went to a bunch of different places and I spent probably 6 months researching and looking for wheel samples. And I've narrowed it down to a few. So I've tried about 5 different companies so far and skated their wheels. I've narrowed it down to a few that I like. Right now I'm on some 60 millimeter samples. These are great wheels. They wear really well. They're just, no name wheels. It doesn't have a brand on them or anything. These are sample wheels, but they're 60 millimeter. They're 92A. I really like that. I want to do these with this profile in a 56. I think that there's something there. I think that a flat profile works really well, but I really want to try a rounded 56. And I want to try different hardnesses. You know, the Cosmo wheels, the mini flies, my favorite wheels of all time. Actually, I have them. I forgot I was just talking about that. So these are the Cosmo mini flies. These things are a little worn now, but new. They were 55, and 85. Is that right? Somebody correct me. I can't really read it. The graphics are kind of faded. I think it was a 55, 85. 85A, like that's super soft, right? So I want to try it, and I want to see if an 85A wheel is good. I don't know. I'm in no rush. You know, I think Long has wheels in stock. I highly recommend, the Apex wheels if you want to skate flat on 50/50 balance frames. It is the best, in my experience, the best 56 millimeter wheel out there. I have skated Eulogies and they're fine. I don't know. I need to skate them both. I've never skated the Apex ones. I've only seen people skating them, and I know from reports that they are long lasting and that they work good. So I'm looking into making them. I don't have anything to report yet. Again, I don't have any timing. This stuff is going to take a long time, and I'm not in any rush. You know, there are wheels on the market that fit. There aren't a lot of wheels on the market that fit. I want to try the difference between a 56 and a 55. I want to try different profiles. I want to try different hardnesses. And I want to see if I can come up with a formula that's unique, that makes a balance frame skate the way that I think a balance frame should skate. It's not going to be hard to find a 60 millimeter outside. It is hard to find a good 55, 56 millimeter inside. So that's what I'm working on. I hope to have an update by the end of the year with maybe a ship date of beginning of next year with the yellow frames. But don't hold me to that. Again, I don't know. I don't want to rush it, and I don't want to ship something that I don't believe in just because I want to ship a set of wheels. So stay tuned. That's my answer. All right. 55, 85. Thank you, Sasha. I knew it was 55. And that's the thing. Like, I can't find a 55. Like, where do you find a 55 millimeter? Who makes them now? Eulogy makes them, right? And that's about it. But Eulogy doesn't make wheels for other companies. They only make Eulogy wheels. And I don't know how to make wheels. I'm busy enough. I've got a job. I don't know how to make wheels. So I need to find somebody who can make the wheels. If Eulogy is the only one who has a 55 millimeter and they won't make wheels, that's not an option. So I've been looking around. I think I'll find them. I think 55 is an interesting size though, especially on a low profile frame. I think that it could work really well. But I got to find that profile right, and I got to find that hardness. So we'll see. Yes, Undercover makes a 55 as well. I don't know that they ship a... No, Powerslide does a 55 now as like a team wheel or something like that. And I think Undercover makes them. So yes, USD, not Powerslide. Thank you. Let's see. Scott, I'm going back a little bit. Scott, I don't know if you're still online. The Fifth Element, yes, they had detachable frames. They were not the first. We actually did a podcast. I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes, but I'll probably forget. We did a podcast special about frames and the history of frames. If you do a search, if you go to the Back to Blading podcast and you click on podcast, or Back to Blading website and you click on podcast, and you go through, it was probably around summer of last year. It was a while ago. Um, we did a history of frames, and we talked about the different frames, and we kind of, um, you know, I guess imagined what a UFS 2 standard could look like. Um, yes, the Rossi's Fifth Element was one of the first detachable frames. The oxygen argon was replaceable as well with screws. It was probably the first one with anti rivets, which um, was little screws in the female and the male that screw in the frames so they stuck on, and you could replace the frames that way. Um, Before then, the Rossi's lowriders and the Impalas were the metal frame. Those frames also, I think they used a standard 165 mount. Um, they could come off as well. So technically, not the first, but I would definitely say that the Fifth Element were some of the first super, again, innovative skates at the time. Everybody wanted those Fifth Elements. It was one of the problems with the fatties that you couldn't do anything. Once you wore down your fatties, you just threw them out. And they were, the material that they used for the soles wore really quickly, which isn't a bad thing, but definitely wore faster, especially for broke college kids. And I'm sure, some of you were in grade school or high school at the time, wearing through your K2 fatties because you were doing unities and royales all day. I mean, royale's a great feeling trick, so I don't blame you for doing it all day, but you wear through that frame and you're toast. Your skate's just dead. So, good point. Biggest size wheel, Eric. Biggest size wheel you can fit on 50/50 freestyle frames? I don't know. I don't know. Again, I designed them. I designed the frames 15 years ago, and I've never skated them. I held them in my hand once. I don't know. I would imagine that we went with 60 millimeter. I don't know. I'll have to find out. I have looked just for reference. I have looked into bringing them back. Um, it's just me this time. I don't have any financial backing. I don't have a business partner or anything. It's just me and whatever money I could put together. And, the thanks to the shops and the skaters for supporting us and purchasing the frames and pre-ordering to help with the production. We really couldn't have brought back 50/50 without your help. But there's only so many of us out there who are willing to help. Um, Trying to bring out two sets of frames at launch is going to be really difficult. I mean, there's a reason why I had to wait to bring out white frames, right? But brought out blacks, sold through the blacks. I have like 10 sets left in stock. Shops have a few more, but I brought in 400 sets of frames and I have only 10 left. So that's a great sign that this is working. I have whites and blacks coming in the next run. So every time that I can bring them in, I can double. So when I bring in the yellows, I'll bring in the whites, the blacks, and the yellows. And if I can keep rolling that money, I have a full-time job. I'm not spending the money on craziness. This money just goes back into the pot and it goes back into production. It's where t-shirts come from. Wet t-shirts. They'll be dry if you order them, by the way, unless you're into that sort of thing. I just roll them into production, and stickers and frame spacers and beanies and giveaways and stuff like that. We're going to be sponsoring Blading Cup in November. We're sponsoring the what year is it? Woodward trip in September. I really want to use 50/50 as a way to give back to the community because I just love skating. And I feel like, I don't want to take the money for myself. I want to make sure that skating has it. I'm fine. This is just to keep things going. But I am going to keep reinvesting into production. So I did look into making core frames again. I don't know that I'd make, so I have a core, I thought I had a core balance frame. Maybe I don't have a core balance frame. Oh, you know what? I cleaned up the garage. It's in a box somewhere. I don't have a core balance frame, but I had a core balance frame. It is very similar to the regular balance frame. I don't know that I want to bring that back yet, but I am really interested in the freestyle frame. And the reason is that I never skated the freestyle frame. I feel like I know what the balance frame feels like. I have no idea what the freestyle frame feels like. And I've heard nothing but good things. And that really warms my heart that I was able to design a frame that I never skated that actually came out really good on its first try. But I want to know, I don't know what they skate like. If people say that they're good, I have, enough experience now where I can compare, like how good are those frames. So I'm going to see if I can get another set. Jess has a bunch in storage that we're going to be selling at the Blading Cup. So if you are going to be in town, make sure that you come by the 50/50 booth at Blading Cup. We'll do sales, a couple drops during the day. We're not going to, it's not going to be first person waiting in line. I don't want you guys to wait in line for product, but we will have some limited edition vintage stuff that we'll be selling out there. I will snag a pair of Freestyle frames if Jess has a pair. I have cores, so I'll snag a pair and I'll skate them. The problem with the Freestyle frames is that the cores, the internal aluminum cores, they have really high minimums because it's a different material. I think it's like 10,000 sets, or maybe 10,000 pieces, which is 5,000 sets. Like I was saying earlier, I brought in 400 balance frames and I just now sold out. That's going to be difficult to do with 5,000 minimums. So I'm looking into it. Maybe there's another option. This was a little over, 15 years ago. Maybe technology has gotten better where they can make them with smaller minimums. Last time I talked to them, though, the minimums were really high. I know that the molds are still there, though. So if I could figure out a way to make the cores with lower minimums and being cost effective, I'll definitely bring back the Freestyle frames, at least in a limited run, just because I hear so many good things about them. If I just brought them back in one color, I think I'd make a lot of people happy. So stay tuned. We'll see. Oh, Ramon. See, I don't know. We could talk later. I like that I'm able to just roll it myself. I don't think 50/50 never had an investor. Not to say that you'd be an investor or anything, but we never had investors, and that was probably the death of us, to be completely honest. Because it's not like we didn't have money and ideas; we didn't have business sense. We were just making things because we wanted to make things. We didn't have any financial idea on how to turn a profit or when to cut expenses or anything like that. We didn't know anything about forecasting or anything. If we had an investor, they would probably be looking at our books and saying, hey, you guys, you need to stop making these, all these different frames and, focus on this frame. Or, what's this juice fin that you guys made? This is an expensive mold. Why'd you do it? Oh, I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. I kind of like being able to just be in a small operation, but, I appreciate the sentiment. All right. One last thing that I wanted to talk about real quickly is a helmet. And I know you guys are probably sick of me talking about helmets, but I finally got my 888 dual certified MIPS helmet. I think I got it during the last Gear Talk. I finally skated it, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between this and the 888 Sweat Saver. I'll get a little water first. Do I have the pads? I have the pads. Let me put these pads in. These are actually the pads. I think they're for a smaller size. Set it up to make it look all professional. Is this the right size? Yeah, so this one goes in the front. That one goes in the back. There we go. All right. Putting the padding in the helmet. This one goes in the back and this one goes in the front. All right, so this is helmets. So I'm a huge fan of helmets. When I got back to skating, while I wasn't skating, I was playing ice hockey. And, I skated at a beer league, which is a bunch of, over 30 primarily dudes who don't skate very well, who have probably never played hockey in their life, but they want to get out there and try. And that's, a great attitude. We have fun. We have a couple beers after the game, and just, it's just a good experience to get out there. But I've gotten hit in the face so many times with sticks or with people falling over, um, that I take my facial and head protection pretty seriously. So when I started rollerblading again, I knew that I needed a helmet, and I wasn't going to skate without a helmet. I have a family. If I fall down and hit my head and it's a serious injury, um, that could be a really big deal to my family, and it's very selfish of me, I guess, um, to skate without it. At least that's my attitude, and I'm not trying to get preachy or anything. I feel like if I'm a supporter and provider for my family, I should be there, and do everything that I can to make sure that I'm healthy and able to provide for my family. And that's just me. Again, don't take it the wrong way. I don't mean to be preachy. But for me, I wanted to wear a helmet. And the helmet that I started with is this 888 Sweat Saver helmet. So this is a very classic helmet. It's got the 2 holes in the top, 2 holes in the front, the 6 holes in the top, and then the 2 holes in the back for ventilation. It has a really nice padding on the inside. All of this is this squishy padding. And it uses like a terry cloth style. I think this is the Sweat Saver. Maybe this is I'm not sure what helmet this is, but it's just a standard 888 helmet. It's a great helmet. And it did a really good job for me. It kept me safe. I never had use for it. I never hit my head that hard. Little bumps here and there, but nothing crazy. I do feel like this would have done a pretty good job of protecting my head. But it's 2 years old, and I know that helmets don't last forever. So I started thinking about upgrading my helmet, and I watched a video from my friend Kenan, who had a head injury, a traumatic brain injury, last December. And he's done a lot of research on helmets. He was not skating for about 9 months as a result, just because he's nervous. He doesn't want to hit his head again. But he's done a lot of research, and he found this this 888 dual certified MIPS helmet. So this is what he recommends. This is what he skates with. And for a guy who, in my opinion, specializes in traumatic brain injury prevention and dealing with it, for him to get out and skate again is amazing. When he recommends a helmet, I'm going to listen. So you'll notice that is different. So the inside is a plastic yellow surface, yellow material. It does not have the squishy padding that this one does. So this one is very squishy and comfortable. This one, not so comfortable. This material is very solid. The padding, there's padding around the back. You can remove this padding and wash it if you need to, which is great. Goes around the side. It actually goes on the top as well. I'm washing the top one right now. It's in the wash. So I have a different size of the back and the front one. This will be machine washable, so you can take it out if you want. The killer feature for this is that this yellow stuff, you can see it kind of moving around in there. So the helmet's not moving. The inside of the helmet is moving. And that is the MIPS. So it's the Multi-Directional Impact Prevention System, MIPS. I think I got it right. MIPS is a technology that they developed to keep your head injuries to a minimum. If you hit your head, which, let's be honest, you're probably going to do if you're doing an action sport like rollerblading, when you hit your head, one of the biggest problems is the whiplash that you get and the tilt and the change of your head moving and your body moving another way, and it's really bad on your brain. What the MIPS does is when you hit your head, instead of it just hitting and then, just hitting like that, the inside moves a little bit. So you get that slight change of angle and not cushion. It's not a cushioning. It's instead of just hitting and being a solid impact, it moves a little bit. And what that's supposed to do is prevent you from having traumatic brain injuries. It's a little bit more expensive, so it's maybe about $30 more expensive than the standard, you know, 888 helmet that I had. But I feel like, you know, paying $70 for a helmet versus $45 or whatever it was for the other helmet, I'm only going to buy a helmet once every couple of years. I think it's worth the investment. I think it's worth saving up for. I think if you can't afford it, you should definitely just get a helmet. But if you already have a helmet and you're looking to save up and buy a new one, it's definitely worth getting, if not this one, any other helmet that has the MIPS technology. Again, I don't have a lot of information on whether it's scientifically proven to help prevent traumatic brain injuries. I just have a friend who I trust who went through it, and he recommends this helmet. So if he recommends it and if he feels safe going out there, I feel much safer wearing a helmet like this. As far as the fit, it fits very similarly to the other 888 helmet. It is a little tighter and a little smaller, I guess. With this helmet, my ears, famously, my ears flapped out a lot on the sides. With this one, my ears don't flap out, which is a good change. It is a little higher on my head, and I don't know that that's a bad thing, but I feel like the sizing is perfect for me. It has a red buckle clip. That's the difference between that and the other one. The biggest difference, though, is this absorbs a lot of sweat. This absorbs very little sweat. So when I skate, I sweat. You know, I'm just sitting in my garage right now and I'm sweating. The sweat in your eyes when you're dropping in on a quarter pipe for a launch ramp is the worst feeling imaginable. You're just standing and you're doing nothing. You drop in, and that feeling of dropping in, you know, your head's here. As soon as I turn like this, the sweat that was building up behind the padding drips over, and it just got into my eyes. And I went skating this weekend, and it happened like 3 times. It just gets all into my eyes, and I'm like, oh, I'm skating, and I'm wiping my eyes while I'm skating, trying to see the quarter pipe. That's not a good feeling. So I don't really know what I'm going to do about that yet, to be completely honest. It's not like I can stop sweating. So I'm probably going to bring more towels with me when I go to the skate park and wipe my head and wipe out the helmet more often. I've had recommendations of bandanas and stuff like that. I don't know that I'm really a bandana guy, nor could I pull the bandana look off. Not that it's a fashion contest, but I got to feel comfortable out there, and I don't know that a bandana is going to make me feel comfortable, but you got to try it. But other than the sweat thing, I really like this helmet. And again, I've never had to use it. But I feel like if I ever had to use it, I would have a much better impact than if I were wearing a helmet without MIPS. So highly recommend it. I think that if you're on the fence, get whatever helmet you can afford. If you have a little bit more money, if you already have a helmet and you don't mind waiting a couple more months to save up, $10 a month or whatever, put in a jar and save it for a couple of months. It is worth the investment to have the peace of mind that the technology inside this helmet will keep you safe, more safe than the technology in the other helmet. All right. I think we're good. I went long this time. Jeez. I'm at 10:18 over here. That's late. Hanging up this helmet. I hope that everybody... Get in there. I hope that everybody wears a helmet. And if you don't wear a helmet, consider it. It's smart. It's not a big deal. Nobody cares if you're wearing a helmet. You're an adult on rollerblades. It's fine. Find a helmet that works good. Again, I think the MIPS is good. If you don't want to do the MIPS, if you don't want to spend the extra money, it's fine. Get yourself whatever helmet you can afford. Just wear a helmet. Wanted to thank everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. I don't know how many people are still there, but you guys had some great questions. I was able to handle everything that I wanted to address tonight. If you have questions that I didn't get to, I keep a running log throughout the weeks, and I'll write everything down. And if it's a question that I have an answer to, I'll give you a quick response on the Instagram or whatever. If it's something that I don't know, I usually research it, and I'll bring it up in the next Blade Gear Talk. Every other Wednesday, 9 o'clock Eastern. Follow on the Instagram or on Facebook, whichever is your pleasure, and I'll make sure to do a update post a couple days beforehand to remind you. Subscribe on the YouTube. You can tap the bell if you want to get a notification when I schedule it. I think that when I schedule it, it'll show up in your subscriptions so that you won't miss anything. But it'll definitely show up and give you a push when I am streaming live. This show is about you guys. It's my opportunity every other week to talk blading gear. I could not do the show without your questions. So again, I really appreciate everything that you guys have said and contributed to Back to Blading. It's really a great community, rollerblading community in general, but the Back to Blading community, from the podcast to the Instagram to the Facebook to the videos to the Slack channel. Really appreciate you guys. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a great evening if it's the evening where you are, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.